I know we talked a lot about US MLSs, and so we're going to talk right away now about some of the opportunities we have in other verticals and other countries. So I want to bring up two of our international leaders here. Kat Newel, who is VP of Business Innovation for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver in BC, and Vandana Vohra from leading real estate companies of the world. Come on up. So thank you two for being here. It's exciting to have an international conversation. So we've all worked together, worked with Kat on the Canadian Real Estate Association's Technology Committee, and Vandana is on our board of directors at RESO. So you both work in different environments. Depending on which country you work in, it can look a lot different than what we might experience in the US. So Vandana, let's start with you. What does the landscape look like in terms of bringing RESO to the countries you work in?
So leading RE has over 550 member brokerages under them, and we are in 70 different countries due to this. Our brokerage companies are in different sizes, small to big, large, with very different technology adoption. And with that, to accommodate that variations, leading RE has in the past accumulated over 150 customized injection methods. And that is very hard to sustain with and very hard to support. And with that, we've really initiated and supported the RESO standards now, and we are propagating that throughout our brokerages and started working and initiating conversations with them. We have created an XML, a web API and XML and manual injection methods, all based on RESO standards. And we are now starting to work with all our partners, our brokers, our data partners, of completely going towards RESO-based standard injection methods. But we also, because we have an international presence, we also have to accommodate to some international standards that are out there. There's RIA XML in Australia, to say, and that RIA XML is growing too. So we talked a little bit earlier about alignment. We want to see how RESO aligns with international standards too when they're established, and how can we find a sweet spot of mapping them together. So that is a big change we're going through right now. We've initiated that change, and we're hoping that in the coming year, this year, and we should be completely changed towards a more standard method and following RESO standards.
Great, 70 countries, that's obviously massive complexity. Yes. Compared to what most of us work with. So Kat, what's the difference in Canada for you?
So in Canada, we have the equivalent of NAR, it's CREA, so Canadian Real Estate Association, and they do they are very supportive of the country as a whole in many different ways than NAR. And so we've already had standards, or we already have standards in Canada. We have the NDS, the National Data Standard. And when the mapping happened for CREA, they saw an 80% match with the RESO Data Dictionary. So that was already a leg up on that side. And from the web API perspective, we already have a kind of a syndication we call the DDF, the Data Distribution Facility, which really feeds into our national realtor.ca, which has close to about 100% of all listings in all of the country feeds into this. And so the transportation was already in place, and the data dictionary was already in place. And so CREA is currently rolling out, from their perspective, to, I think, about 30 franchises already across the country, like RE/MAX. And by the end of the year, they'll have over 500 technology vendors on the RESO standards as well. So it's spreading like wildfire. And that supports the country as a whole. From provincial level, so we're in Vancouver, and we support about 80% of the province from our organization. And so we are starting our RESO journey now with being active in the work groups, supporting CREA in the work, and getting a more localized rollout of RESO. So those are the things that we're seeing on our side of the border.
And Vandana, what do you see out there that's starting to work right now? For example, we always talk about language differences are a big, very obvious issue that's out there. What do you see that's helping with your work?
So language translations and content is one thing, and we have that we, of course, needs to be conscious of, but the technical mechanism of transporting that is also extremely important, and I know the transport work group is already working in that to accommodate that. It's extremely important to be, when we talk about RESO standardization and innovating towards international, is to be at least in a dozen languages to think of to accommodate the variations that's out there in international markets and how heavily we can push that out. That is something that we should always think towards and achieve towards.
It's a lot of work, guys. You're sitting right up front here. A dozen languages at least.
Yes, that's what we do in everything that we do at Leading RE is focus towards those dozen languages almost.
Okay, great. And Kat, what are you seeing that's working right now?
Yeah, so I think that's going to be very supportive of us. So we have now support for our second language in the country, so French. So we have 2 provinces that work in French. So we have Quebec, that is 100% French, and then New Brunswick, which is both French and English. And so for that, it really works well for us to have the bilingual. Going forward and on a more visionary scale, I think we'd like to support our members that deal in other languages as well. We have a huge Asian community that we'd like to support as well. Our members are from all over the world, and we'd like to support their culturalization and their languages as well as their first language. So like Vandana, I think having the ability to support multiple languages is a big component for us.
So what's important for us to hear probably is our blind spots at RESO. What do we not think about from a US-led perspective that is needed so that we can better support international communities?
RESO is doing a lot, and hearing and working with it, RESO has come such a long way. But again, I'm constantly seeing from an international perspective too. One of the things that I notice and that we're challenged with and we're working towards is the focus of international address needs. Currently, RESO's states and provinces supports US and Canadian states and provinces, but there's 13 other countries out there that have states besides US. There's so many countries that have provinces. How does RESO accommodate to international address needs? Beyond just address, parts of address, there's currencies. Right now, RESO does not support currencies besides dollars, right? But out there is 180 currencies in there, in the market, in the world. And international, the thought that international standardization and focusing towards making real estate standards internationally will really help increase confidence on investments. And truly speaking, we are in a market where there is cross-border investments, and the focus towards standardization and bringing the world together will really improve the confidence level into real estate standards. So that's what I think.
Yeah, so just continuing on the address, we have a very sparse population in Canada. I think Northwest Territories is so sparsely populated. There might be aspects of addressing that's different from the rest of North America. And so there are some intricacies, even just on our own continent, I think we need to take into account. So more localized, there is a big push in specifically in British Columbia and other provinces as well in Canada for more culturalization. So First Nations, here we call them Native Americans, but the First Nations in Canada are being recognized more and more. Their languages are supported more and more, and so that also has an impact on how we name things. So I live in Vancouver, but I also recognize it's the ancestral territory of the Squamish and Musqueams, the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I say these names, it's easy for me to say, but the spelling is a completely different character set. We have numbers as part of a word, like Squamish has a 7 in there. We have underscores underneath a K and an X. There's W's that are small and lifted. And so the character sets, just to describe cities, roads. We see roads that are getting more and more First Nations names back. We're getting completely new areas being built up in my neighborhood. It's called Sinaqua, and it's one of the biggest property developments the city has had in years, with over 7,000 units. And so even just in North America, I think we can see there's going to be a greater support for culturalization as part of the rollout of RESO and being able to use the culturalization as part of real estate.
Well, let's close out with an easy one. English. We've got English right, don't we?
Well,
That's another one.
there is English Canadian, and then there's English, and then there is Australian English.
Yes.
And I mean, you can, just continue this.
Yes, measurements and everything that we talk about. There's so many variations of English. There's so many variations of Spanish. And then that's where we need to focus on. Understanding the needs of languages, understanding that some countries don't even have keyboards with an English technology structure that we're so used to, right? And how do we establish and work towards that international market, knowing that the world is getting smaller?
Perfect. Thank you both for opening our minds a little bit this morning. Great to have you here. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.